Welcome back to Agranak Studios. I'm DM Wisdom, and today we're going to be taking a look at The Crooked Moon, folk horror role-playing. Imagine a Dungeons & Dragons game where the Wicker Man meets Midsummer meets The Witch. That's exactly what The Crooked Moon aims to be. A massive folk horror campaign setting that turns your tabletop game into a dreadful folktale. Today I'm flipping through this massive book so you can see why it's quickly becoming one of the most hauntingly beautiful RPG books out there. This book is over 630 pages, I can barely even lift it, of content specifically for 5e. That is D&D 5e. They have a 2024 version and a 2014 version of which this is. I know what many of my viewers are saying. Why a 5e book? Well, this is not WotC and their twisted ways. This is written by Avantris Entertainment. It has the themes I typically want in my D&D games, and their advertisement for their Kickstarter was amazing, and I just had to get it. The Crooked Moon is a full folk horror campaign setting for 5e that mixes atmospheric storytelling, creepy folklore, and unsettling monsters into one giant tome. Now, the setting is Duskinvald, or Duskinvald, and you can see this half-moon sort of bay area that it encapsulates and all the different locations throughout. There's also a map on the back cover for Wickermore Hollow. I really love the artwork here. Very, very cool. Reminds me of the Misty Veil for Dragonbane, and I'm wondering if it's the same exact artist. At any rate, the art throughout is stupendous, wonderful. Here's your table of contents, plenty to go through. You can see the layout is very clean. Has that 5e sort of vibe, but I also get the same vibe as Dragonbane. The art is wonderful through the entire book. Very, very cool, giving you tons of information throughout. Now, the land of Duskinvald is trapped between life and death, a patchwork of 13 eerie provinces, each with its own twisted folklore, like plague-haunting Bobonia, starlit Astramar, and the haunted woods of Ardengloom. It's a place where the moon is always crooked and the sun never rises. Getting deeper into the book, there are some player options for 5e, and they have a whole chapter here on species. The Ashborn, which is an imp type, the Azureborn, Bogborn, Curseborn, Deepborn, Gnarlborn, Graveborn, Harvestborn, Plagueborn, Relicborn, Silkborn, Stoneborn, Threadborn, and then you have subclasses for all of these different species. It almost seems limitless, all the different things that you are getting in this book. So just to go through some of these subclasses, you have a Harvest Domain Cleric, Druid Circle of the Old Ways, Druid Circle of Wicker, which is pretty cool, the Fighter Barrow Guard, and so many more going through here. And then they get into a bunch of backgrounds like the Amnesiac, the Crimson Aspirant, Crossroads Gambler, Duskinvald Dweller, Ghostlight Passenger, and so on. So for those of you that are playing 5e, this will be very easy to comprehend and get going and getting a player character up and running quickly. Feat descriptions. Just a couple pages of that. There's a lot of stuff that just really gets you grounded into this game world. Spell lists, there's new spells as well as spell suggestions for your normal 5e spells that you have access to that would work in this setting. Again, more awesome artwork throughout. And then right here, this is where we get into the meat of the book. I mean, that's a lot of pages right there. 133 pages of content for background, the towns, as well as player options for the setting. Then from page 135 all the way to page 483 is a complete campaign adventure that takes you from 1st to 13th level. Now, this is the chunk of the book that I'm probably going to reference the most. Not because I'm going to play through this adventure, but because there are awesome things throughout. Scenarios and conflicts, maps, and just all sorts of goodies that you can use for basically any game that you might be playing. And I'll use this for my own campaign setting called the Sawwing campaign, which is also folk horror in its presentation, but I think a little bit more so than this is. This is more heroic and fantastical, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But there's plenty of things in here that that I can use, I can lift and almost put directly into my game world, especially some of these maps here. And then obviously keyed locations for these maps. So that is an awesome just amount of campaigning that you can go on using this book. So this in and of itself for me is worth the value of this book because I like to reskin things. Moving on, we have a whole Appendix A Bestiary right here with all sorts of unsettling monsters that you can fight, like the Bayou Beast or a centipede hag. That is awesome. The Crow Storm or the Crooked Man himself, which he happens to be one of the baddies I think that you encounter in the adventure path that they have laid out. Ferryman, the Dream Eater. Wait a second. I've got a monster called the Dream Eater, and I made a whole Shadow Dark scenario for it. Anyways, yeah, you should pick that up. There's a link down in the dungeon. So all sorts of great monsters that you can plug in. Again, wonderful things that you can use for your own campaign setting and whatever you might be doing if you're not even using a book like this. Just to be perfectly transparent, I am not being paid for this review. This was a book that I bought on my own. And yeah, and I see plenty of things that I can use here. Lots of monsters. Very, very cool. Now, I would have liked to have seen an option where, like, the Bestiary, the adventure, and then the campaign setting were all their own separate books, because I used to play Pathfinder, and their main core book was as big as this, and that thing just eventually fell apart and was a mess. And I think that if I were to use this book a lot, that it would probably have the same sort of issues. Now, it is stitch bound, you can see here, and it has this nice ribbon to mark your place, which is always a really nice touch, really appreciated. More and more beasts. Yeah, just so many awesome things to glean from and use. The Wicker Man, awesome. Tons and tons and tons of stuff. And they spared no expense with their artists. I mean, this doesn't look like AI art to me. It's very much in line with D&D 5e and their sort of aesthetic. So hopefully real people making real stuff. Here's Appendix B on treasure, and they've got a banjo here, and you can see with some of the artwork, it's almost got like a Victorian feel to it. Especially there is a train, and I'm going to get into the synopsis of the adventure here in a second. But lots of magic items for you to interject that are totally appropriate for the setting. Paranormal potions, very cool. Love this. Chaotic curses, D100 of them. And then the music, and you can go to find all the tracks on their website, which is currently down right now. So, but I'm going to put a link to where you can get all this stuff. And then the Kickstarter backers and an index. Great stuff. So there might be some spoilers ahead. If you are planning on being a player here, I would click away, go watch one of my other videos. But the Crooked Moon, the adventure begins aboard the ghost-like express. Yeah, you can see how they're kind of getting into the flapper, a 1920s sort of look. And you see Victorian things like I mentioned before. Through it, at least with the dress and things that are going on, but then obviously is primal in that fantasy adventure sort of style with some of the art as well. So take it or leave it, however you like it or don't like that sort of aesthetic being mixed together. At any rate, the adventure begins aboard the Ghostlight Express, a spectral train that ferries souls to the afterlife. Here it is right here. The characters find themselves stranded in Wickermore Hollow, a valley steeped in folk horror where the dead stir, hags plot, and cultists serve an ancient imprisoned goddess known as Kalen or Keelan, the Crooked Queen. Tarot card readings and whatnot, fate weaving is what they're calling it. At the center of the land's fate are Philip and Adela Duskinvald, noble rulers bound by prophecy. Despite their power, they are doomed pawns in the schemes of the Crooked Queen. Her ultimate goal is to return from her prison within the Crooked Tree and unleash her consort, the Horned King, a black goat god of sin and annihilation. And he is depicted back here. Great art right here. Love it. Three-eyed goat. I've got a three-eyed goat in my campaign setting called the blind goat. He's actually blindfolded, so there is a difference. I'm not copyright infringing, and I've been writing my shit for a couple years now. And but I'm sure they have too. Maybe it's just something in the air. So over the course of the campaign, the heroes journey across Wickermore Hollow, confronting just a bunch of different things, covens and the fallen, cultists and monsters who spread chaos and death, etc. All the typical wonderful things that you would encounter in a folk horror sort of setting. So the party must find and confront Philip Duskinvald, battle the Horned King's emergence, sever Keelan's bonds with the land forever through sacrifice and ritual. If the heroes succeed, Keelan is bound within the Crooked Moon above, forced to watch the world she hates from afar. In short, the adventure is a folk horror epic where players confront cults, hags, and horrors across the haunted valley, culminating in a desperate battle to stop a goddess and her monstrous consort from annihilating the land beneath a fallen moon. Now, I do love the visual appeal here. The art is wonderful throughout, moody, creepy, atmospheric. It feels like opening up an old storybook of ghost tales. But every page has something you can actually run at the table, which is great. Let's talk about what I don't like. I didn't know what the interior, or maybe I didn't have access to the PDF or just didn't download it. I don't know if they had a preview. But I remember getting the PDF version a while back as they were finishing up the book. And as soon as I saw the different species, personally, my heart sunk. When we talk about folk horror, to me, it should be human-centric. In my campaign setting, Samhain Vale is human-centric. And to be able to play an Ashborn or an Azureborn, a Bogborn, a Cursedborn, a Deepborn, etc., from the get-go, completely takes me out of the folk horror vibe, at least personally. If you can play a monster, then the monsters aren't monstrous that you're fighting. At least that's what I think. This is personal opinion. Your mileage may vary. But if you're a human discovering these things, then that is a completely different level of fear that you have to deal with, which I think is most appreciated in a folk horror sort of setting. So I really don't like this. Now, on the other side of the coin, being turned into one of these creatures while you're playing after being a human is a very interesting idea, like becoming a Threadborn, one of these puppets. How crazy would that be? I think that would be awesome as a curse takes hold of your human player characters. So this really, for me personally, really misses the mark of something titled folk horror. Now, that being said, the art is wonderful. The amount of content you get here is great, and the maps are off the chart. I usually read who the writers are, but it looks like there's a bunch of writers. The creative director is Mikey Gilder. Publisher is Richie Gilder. A bunch of lead designers and a bunch of writers here. I'm kind of surprised that I don't see James Spawn in here, but whatever. Love you, James. And a lot of different interior illustrations by a bunch of different people and a lot of different cartographers. So it was a labor of love by a large team of people. So if you're looking for a way to make your D&D sessions feel darker, scarier, and way more atmospheric, then the Crooked Moon might just be for you. Whether you want a new setting, a whole campaign, or just some creepy new monsters and magic items and all the goodness that goes with it, this book, I think, delivers. Let me know in the comments if you dare run your players through Duskinvald, or if you think they'd never survive a night under the Crooked Moon. All right, everyone, thanks for stopping by Agranak Studios today, and we'll see you on the next one. Later!